Hey everybody, it's Miss Chris here, getting ready to train you for the STAR English 2 field test, which we'll be taking on February 15th during first through fourth periods. Here's the agenda for training today. We'll talk about procedures, the manual, also known as the instruction packet. This time it's not a whole manual. How to prepare the room, security and confidentiality, STAR policies and procedures, supports and accommodations, monitoring, submitting the test, and online administration instructions. First off, I want to share with you the plan. If you click on the link there, it will be in the email as well. Move my face out of the way. Here is the list of assignments for the day. It's currently filtered by the people who are doing testing. So it's gonna remain that way. We don't need to see the blank. So I've listed here the staff members in alphabetical order of what your assignments are and what your job is. So we have test administrators, then we have AP duties and other non-testing duties necessarily listed here. You can kind of scroll down there. That's on this side to the left of the black. To the right of the black line, you'll see we have faculty movement due to testing and the periods of where they're supposed to go. So I always like to do this in my training video. You're going to control F and we're going to use, let's say, James Rath. We're going to see where his name is. So I'm going to make sure I'm on the spreadsheet, hit control F. I'm going to type in my last name, which would be Rath. I see that it comes up one time here on the sheet, so I'm going to hit the arrow, and my name is highlighted down here. So he's going to move his classes into room 1247 for all four periods. He's got a pretty easy schedule. I also know that his classroom is 1208, so I want to know if anyone is testing in my room if I'm James Rath. And there's one occurrence where my number shows up. And here it is, 1208. John Wilson is a test administrator in my room. So I know who's coming in and I know where I'm going. So if you are a teacher with movement, it is your responsibility to tell your kids where they're moving to. Write it on the board starting now. Have them all take a screen grab. If something gets changed, let them know. Okay. Another thing of note here, there's a notes section. There's kind of some interesting little situations for teachers. The teachers who are testing are primarily 10th grade teachers or have 10th grade students. Sometimes you'll be a 10th grade teacher with some 11th, 12th, or 9th graders. It's going to be your responsibility to have the non-testers get relocated amongst your department. So plan with your people where your kids are going. I don't want them to be confused about where they're supposed to go on test day. So be real specific about that and make a plan. If you want to know if your student is testing or not, there's a tab down below here called Student Room Assignments, which I will unfilter. And if they have to test, their name will be on this list. There's a couple of special cases here and there, but if you have any question whatsoever, please look at this list. All right, it's back to the other tab. Gotta get back there. Let's pause for a second. Okay, we're back. Sorry about the malfunction. So please look over this carefully. If you have a question about it, ask your friends about how to understand it. But if you really can't figure it out, please let me know. And I appreciate everybody's patience on this day. It's always kind of difficult to be moving around and doing different things, but I appreciate you. All right, so back to the training here. We've already covered what we plan to do. This time there's not a test manual. There's called a standalone field test instruction manual. If you're testing, you'll get a copy of it ahead of time in your mailbox this week. And there will also be a copy in the testing bin as well when you pick it up, just in case. As always, we've reviewed security in January, but here is the security at a glance. If you have any concerns about what you can and cannot do, please pause the video and review this. It will also be in your testing bin on testing day. As always, we do not help students with exams. We do not give answers. We do not let kids test who aren't on the list, etc. Is a list of violations if you happen to commit any of them during testing and what can happen. Feel free to pause the video and read through them. Same thing here. Feel free to pause the video and read through them. But I just want to address procedural irregularities. We need to be very careful with subjects and session IDs, which we talked about in January. So please make sure that you're not giving a session ID for a subject that we're not testing, which cannot happen this time, but it's always something I'd like you to focus on. The subject of the test and the session IDs. Here's some more. Feel free to pause it and read. Again, penalties if you commit these serious irregularities. Pause and read. Everybody has signed an oath. There's a few teachers who are working on that, but you cannot access exam materials or session IDs until you sign this. Student room assignments, as always, will be posted on the walls in the usual places: cafeteria, the library, and the lower lobby. Also, like I showed you, they're in tab number 2 on the big spreadsheet, the testing plan. For any English 1 or 2 exam, we're only doing English 1 today. If a student asks you to read the prompt, any writing prompt out loud, you can look over their shoulder at their computer, read the prompt as stated, and do no elaboration whatsoever. You cannot give them any suggestions about how to start or what to write about. You're simply reading it with a regular voice, no suggestion. And obviously, if you do get in a situation where you get to read that, you are not allowed to discuss whatsoever what you read to the students. So read it and forget it. Secure materials. Now that we're not using test books anymore, session IDs are considered secure materials along with student test tickets. And once a student logs into a Chromebook, it's like a test book or an answer document. Students aren't walking around with that at all. A student should only ever be in their seat with their Chromebook. A teacher can, yes, they can move the Chromebook from desk to desk or room to room, but students will never walk around with test tickets or Chromebooks that are logged into testing or session IDs. All 3 of those. Those are for teachers to handle. Students who have designated supports, which are text-to-speech, the tools that they'll access online for testing, they'll be assigned to the student and listed on the accommodations roster. If you have students in your room with designated supports, you're required to inform those students about those supports and make sure that you read the proper instructions in the manual or the packet so that they know what they are and they know that they have them. You also need to sign the sheet saying that you have acknowledged that they are there and that you told the students about that. Accessibility features are things that any student can have. If you have students who need any of these things listed here, please let me know prior to testing and we'll see if we can accommodate them. Next, we're going to talk about policies and procedures. Down here, the preparing the testing environment, we'll use James Rath again. Since his room is being used for testing, it's his responsibility to prepare the room for testing. For I think it was John Wilson who's going in there. It's also John's job to go in the night before testing and just touch base with Mr. Rath and make sure everything's in check. The clock is working. The desks are in order. Everything's been cleared out of the testing area. We don't want to rush on testing morning. There's nothing worse than that. Monitoring the testing morning. You're going to pick up your materials from the testing room, which is 1253 across from the LGI. Make sure that you silence your phone and get it out of sight once you get testing materials. You'll get pencils, the field test instruction packet, scratch paper, highlighters, sticky notes will be in there if you need any, test tickets, seating chart, session IDs. You'll get your signs and your accommodation documentation. Check out the materials with me and account for all of your items before you leave. The students have access to an online dictionary, but we will be placing 6 dictionaries in each room so that students can access them if they need them, if they prefer the paper one, but we're strongly encouraging the online version. Materials control and inventory, like I said before, You're going to count your tickets and make sure you have a ticket for every kid on your roster before you leave. And if you have an accommodated room, we'll have a little chat about everything that's going on. And the same thing when you return everything you took from my testing room in the morning, you need to return it in the same condition, and we'll get you checked back in. Your roles and responsibilities: maintaining the security of the test materials until you return them, not abandoning them or setting them down, preparing and distributing the materials for each administration as instructed, implementing the process and procedures as stated in manuals, monitoring and maintaining security, reporting any suspicious violation as soon as it happens directly to me. No waiting, please. Prepare test materials for return to the coordinator and at the conclusion of test administration. Monitoring, we expect teachers to actively monitor. I always suggest to monitor from the back of the room, so you can see a lot more of what's going on underneath the desks, and then the students aren't focused on looking at you all the time and being distracted. Actively move around. Please do not try to get 20,000 steps. That's distracting to students. Students are not allowed to talk when they finish testing until all materials are returned. And they're all going to stay in there until it's time to go. We'll dismiss together. Cell phones for students should be turned off, powered off, and placed in their purses or backpacks away from the testing area. And you can collect them in bins if you need to. If you come across a student with a phone during testing, please let us know. We need to come investigate if they've been taking pictures or texting about the exam. Guide to administration directions. Every time we do a test, everyone must read the section before we administer the state assessment. This time there's not really anything in the packet because it's a field test. Just always make sure you understand the difference between the narrow call out boxes, which are procedural. Sarah's at the door. All right, I'm back. All right, so the narrow call out boxes are procedural for the test administrator, which is you, and the wide call out boxes are for the students to read. Please read your instructions prior to testing and be prepared. Highlight items that you need to focus on and things you need to read depending upon what kind of students you have in your room. You must read every say direction and follow it to a T. Right before you get ready to read instructions, you're going to pass out student test tickets. I would suggest that you have like scratch paper, pencils, and earbuds already distributed to the kids, but once you pass out test tickets, it's time to start reading the instructions after that. We do not lay test tickets on desks for students to help locate where they're seated. That is a no. That's not going to work because kids will jump in there and get ahead of time, and that's considered procedural irregularity. And if you're missing a ticket, which you shouldn't be because you checked them all before you left the testing room, please contact us immediately. The time policy is a little bit different for this field test. It's expected to take 2 to 2.5 hours for an average student to complete, but we are not allowed to test past 5 hours, even for extra time students. So the hope is that we'll test through fourth period and move on. If there's any students still testing with extra time around 10:30, we're going to move them to room 1264, and then they'll continue their testing and then finish out. But we'll be able to move to lunch in regular fifth period. Also, as the students are testing, yes, we do have a 5-hour limit to do that. Just keep reminding the students as we go. Just keep reminding the students how much time is left hourly. 4 hours left, 3 hours left, 2, 1. And then if we get down to that situation in the extra time room, 30 minutes, 15, 5, 10. It's always good to do that for the students, and it's required. Stop and start times should be recorded on the usual page. I know it's a little confusing, but please make sure you update that if your room gets moved or we have an emergency or time gets stopped. Please fill out all the items. The lines are there for a reason. Anybody who comes into your room to relieve you for testing for a restroom break, they should sign their name on one of the 3 lines in the middle there and complete the entire thing. If it's an administrator just stopping by to check in and look, they don't have to sign their name. But if you leave the room for any reason, that person should sign, even if it is an administrator. Students who arrive late, if they get to your room and you have started reading instructions, you should send them down to the testing room, which is 1253, and we'll work on a plan for them. If you just opened your mouth and you're in the first and second sentence, you can pause and let them in. That would be greatly appreciated. But once you get to the point where students are typing in session IDs and names, I would not allow a student to come in. Breaks and pausing the test. This is new now that we have online testing. Anytime a student takes a restroom break or a stretch break or needs to step out and have a snack or something, the student needs to pause their test, which will blank out the screen. So if they pause their test, then we can't see anything on it. And then when they get back from their test, they can unpause it. Any break longer than 30 minutes will log a student out. So we don't want to do that. And if they get logged out, they're going to need the session ID back to log back in. Speaking of that, once the students have begun testing, I would remove the session ID from the board so that it helps with monitoring. If a student gets logged out, you know what's going on instead of them just trying to get back in. It just helps with monitoring. If the student leaves the room for an unusually extended period of time and returns, please let us know if they've been gone for 20 minutes and they said they're going to go to the restroom. We just want to check in with the student and see what's going on and make sure they weren't all over the building and that the test hasn't been compromised. Times and untimed breaks. We know that the clock does not pause for water breaks, restroom breaks, snack breaks, or short physical or mental breaks or little tiny naps. We cannot require the students all to take a break at the same time unless the entire school has planned to do that. So in the next box over, we would pause the clock if we had a plan for lunch, which we will not this time. If there was a medical break for a student, they would be in a special room for that. Emergency situation, everybody's clock would probably stop at the same time. And then if we were moving testing rooms, we would pause the student's clock and then restart it when they get into their new room. Moving on, here with the seating chart, here at THS, we like to keep it nice and neat. Everything will be on one page, seating chart, attendance. Here's your seating chart here. You're just going to write the number that corresponds with the student's name in the box where they're sitting. You can get creative. If you need more space, feel free to do it on the back. Just make a note that it's there. You're going to record their attendance here for present and absent. Just a check mark is all you need to do. And then if the student gets moved, please make a note of where they went. And then the last thing is start and stop times. Everyone's start time should be the same. You can put that up here. But their stop time should be listed in this area here or this area here and all the way down. There's not a label for it, but it's crucial that we know when they stopped so we can have that data to help make decisions for ARDS and 504 meetings, or if the state asks for the information, we have it. These are the signs that need to go on the door as usual. The one, the time limit one you need to adjust, the cell phone policy for Tomball ISD, and the testing do not disturb. Make sure that students are aware of the cell phone policy, write it or post it on the board. All right, so now to testing, actually. So students are going to have a test ticket, which does look similar to this. The only thing they really need off of there is you're going to see how their first name is spelled for testing, and then their TSDS number. They're going to ask them to confirm their date of birth and the subject potentially. So that's the student's test ticket. And then over here you have the session ID, which will be one card in your testing box. So that's what you'll post up on the board. And if it's too small, you can write it on the board as well. So that's how the student will get in, with the TSDS name and session ID. Now, when you're entering that information, it's part of the say directions. So students should be not entering all of that and then starting directions. You need to follow exactly as it tells you in the directions. Answering student questions, we cannot help them with anything except directions about the test and procedures. You cannot help with content. If a student is asking you for help, you need to say, I cannot answer for that. I can't answer that for you. Just do the best you can. TAs are not allowed to translate, rephrase, view, discuss, score tests at all. There's some online tools that are available for all the students to use. In the back of the instruction book, there is a legend of what the little pictures are and what they mean. If a student asks you what to do, you can reference it and say, and here's what the tool looks like, and then read what it says it does. You can't touch the tool and show the kid how to manipulate it. You should never be touching the student's keyboard or mouse to do that. You can just simply explain to them. Submitting a test, this is a big deal with this new type of online testing that we do. Part of the instructions instructs the students to raise their hand when they get to a certain part of the test, and then you watch them submit the test. The only way we know how if a student submitted a test, if we were uncertain, is they could log in again. And if they truly had submitted, they wouldn't be able to log in to the test anymore because it is submitted. So that's how you can confirm if a student gets out of the test before you were able to get to them or they just got impatient. So that's how you'll know if it has been fully submitted. Only the student can log back in to see if it's been submitted or not. We cannot do that, and I can't, and the TAs cannot do that. So it's really important that you help the kids follow that instruction like all the other ones. Okay, so this is yellow. It's probably hard to see, but after the students submit the test, you're going to collect all the test tickets before they leave the room and account for them. If a student was absent, please keep that test ticket separate, which you shouldn't have it because we'll be coming around to get those after testing has started for our late room. Collect all reference materials. If the dictionaries were in the room already, leave them in the room. You don't have to bring them. Make sure the session ID comes down from the board. That's like the one test booklet for the whole room. And the seating chart is complete with start and stop times, attendance, everything before you return to the testing room. School-wide emergencies, we had one in December. It was kind of nice. So if an alarm goes off or we're asked to evacuate the building, if you look at tab button number 2 here, students need to close their device, leave all testing materials at their desk, and follow the directions to leave the classroom. Okay, test administrators, you're down here. All you need to do is grab your roster so you can keep track of your kids and leave everything else in the room. This is the only time that you abandon materials. I don't want to see somebody outside with a bin and their testing tickets. Your life is more important than that, but I do appreciate you thinking about it, but I just want you with your students and their rosters. You need to keep all of your students accounted for. If we were evacuating during a test, I would expect to see students in lines out with their teacher in front of them, maybe even alphabetized because you checked your roster about who's there. It should be the most orderly evacuation we've ever seen. And we have students who are non-testers. We don't want them mixing with the testers. So we should see nice lines of testing rooms with rosters and then those other kids away from them. Okay, lunch, we kind of already addressed it. We're going to test through the end of 4th period, and lunch will go on as normal, but we will have an extended time room potentially, and those kids will eat after they're finished testing. Oh, this thing here, oh, that's not true. I wish we could provide you lunch. We can't provide you lunch, but we do have testing snacks. But if you want lunch on testing days, feel free to go work over at Tomball Memorial. We don't want you to do that, though. If you have any questions, please ask your friends, and then always ask me for clarification. I will be in the testing room the day prior, so if you want to come look at your bins and look at your accommodation kids and maybe get your copy of your roster so you can make your seating chart ahead of time, I really do appreciate that. We'll see you next Tuesday.